The afternoon light settled gently across the living room, the kind of quiet glow that arrives when the day has no urgency left in it. Dust floated lazily in the air, and the ticking of a small clock blended with the distant hum of life outside. An elderly woman sat in her favorite chair, hands folded, eyes half closed, not asleep, just resting in that peaceful space between memory and now. That was when the dog appeared. He didn't rush in. He didn't bark or demand attention. He simply walked across the room with calm purpose, his paws soft against the floor, as if he already knew exactly where he belonged. Without a sound, he lowered himself beside her chair and rested there, his body angled just close enough to touch. The woman noticed. Her eyes opened slowly, surprise flickering across her face. She hadn't called him. She hadn't reached out. Yet somehow, he had come anyway. She watched him for a moment, her breath catching just slightly, as though something familiar had returned without warning. The dog didn't look at her for approval. He didn't move once he settled. His gaze stayed forward, steady and peaceful, as if he were standing guard over something invisible but important. Every few seconds, his chest rose and fell in quiet rhythm, matching the calm of the room. The woman's hand trembled as she lowered it gently toward him. When her fingers brushed his fur, her shoulders relaxed. A soft smile formed, one that carried more years than words ever could. Something about the way he rested there felt intentional. Timeless. As though this moment had happened before, long ago. And whatever the dog sensed in that quiet room, his behavior had a meaning no one expected. The afternoon arrived slowly. Not the kind that rushes in with noise or purpose, but the kind that settles quietly, like it has nowhere else to be. Sunlight drifted through the thin white curtains, softening the edges of the living room. It rested on the wooden floor, climbed the side of an old bookcase, and finally came to a stop beside a single armchair near the window. That chair had been there for years. It faced the street, not because anything exciting ever happened there, but because it gave the best light. Warm. Gentle. Forgiving. Evelyn sat in it the way she always did. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers loosely intertwined. Her back leaned into the cushion, worn thin from time and use. Her eyes weren't fully closed, just lowered, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. The room smelled faintly of tea and old pages. A clock ticked from the kitchen wall, steady, patient. Nothing demanded attention. And that was when the dog entered the room. He didn't bound in. He didn't hesitate at the doorway. He walked in with quiet certainty, each step measured, as though the path ahead had already been decided. His nails made the softest sound against the floor. Barely noticeable. Almost respectful. Evelyn felt the shift in the room before she saw him. Her eyes opened a little wider. The dog moved past the couch, past the low table stacked with letters she never threw away, and stopped beside her chair. He stood there for a moment. Still. Focused. Then, without looking up, he lowered himself to the floor and rested at her side. Close. Not touching, but close enough to feel. Evelyn's breath caught. Oh, she murmured. It wasn't surprise exactly. More like recognition. She hadn't called him. Hadn't reached out. Hadn't even known she needed anything. Yet here he was. The dog didn't curl up. Didn't fidget. Didn't seek attention. He simply lay there, his body aligned with the chair, his head facing forward, as though he were watching over something unseen. The light brushed his fur, warming it. He exhaled slowly. Evelyn studied him. The way his ears stayed relaxed. The way his breathing matched the calm of the room. The way he seemed anchored. Her hand lifted slightly, then paused. She didn't want to disturb him. You chose today, she whispered. The dog didn't move. But his tail gave the smallest tap against the floor. Once. That was enough. Evelyn let her hand rest on his back. The warmth surprised her. Not the physical kind, but the kind that spread inward, settling in places she didn't realize were still cold. Her shoulders eased. Her jaw softened. Her breathing slowed to match his. The clock kept ticking. Outside, a car passed. Someone laughed somewhere down the street. Inside, time seemed to stretch. "You always know," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, not with sadness, but with something gentler. Gratitude, maybe. The dog remained still, as if movement would break the moment. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. Evelyn's thoughts drifted, not sharply, not painfully, but softly. Memories surfaced the way sunlight did, slowly, without force. She looked down at the dog again. "You remind me of someone," she said. The words surprised her as soon as they left her mouth. She hadn't meant to say them. The dog shifted then, just slightly, pressing closer to the chair. Contact. Intentional. Her fingers tightened gently in his fur. "That's strange," she whispered. Her smile wavered. "But it feels right." The room seemed to hold its breath. The dog's eyes remained forward. Focused. Steady. As if he were listening, not to her voice, but to something deeper. Evelyn leaned her head back against the chair. For the first time that day, for the first time in longer than she cared to admit, she felt fully present. Not lonely. Not waiting. Just held. When the dog finally shifted his weight again, it wasn't to leave. It was to settle in. As though he planned to stay. And in that quiet living room, bathed in warm afternoon light, a gentle question began to form. Not out loud, but in the space between them. Why now? And why her? The dog didn't answer. But he didn't need to. Because whatever had drawn him to that chair, to that moment, to her, was only just beginning. The next morning arrived quietly. No alarm. No rush. Just the soft gray light slipping through the curtains and the familiar ache in Evelyn's knees as she shifted in her chair. She hadn't realized she'd fallen asleep there. Her blanket was still folded neatly across her lap, the cup on the side table long gone cold. And at her feet, the dog. Still there. Resting in the same place, his body curved slightly toward her, as if the night had passed without changing a thing. Evelyn blinked. You stayed, she whispered. The dog's ears lifted just a fraction. He didn't rise. Didn't stretch. He simply opened his eyes and met her gaze for a brief moment. Then, he closed them again. Evelyn smiled. Not wide. Not dramatic. Just enough to soften her face. She moved carefully this time, sliding her feet back, testing the stiffness in her legs. The dog noticed. Before she could brace herself on the armrests, he shifted closer, not blocking her, not pushing. Just there. Steady. All right, she murmured. I see. She stood slowly. The dog rose only after she did, waiting until she was balanced before taking a step himself. It wasn't obedience. It was awareness. In the kitchen, the kettle clicked on. Steam gathered on the window above the sink. The dog followed, but at a distance. Not underfoot. Not demanding. Watching. Evelyn poured water into her mug, the scent of chamomile filling the room. You don't usually come in here, she said softly. The dog tilted his head. Once. As if considering the thought. She laughed under her breath. That's fair. She carried her tea back to the living room. The chair waited by the window. Before she could sit, the dog moved ahead of her. He crossed the room, turned once, and lay down in the same spot as the day before. The exact same spot. Evelyn stopped. She stared. How do you do that? She asked. The dog didn't answer. He simply rested his head on his paws and sighed. A long, content sound. Evelyn lowered herself into the chair, heart thudding gently now, not with worry, but with curiosity. She studied him again. The way his body relaxed only once she was seated. The way his eyes opened whenever she shifted. The way he seemed to sense each small change before it happened. "You weren't trained for this," she said quietly. "I would know." She reached down, brushing her fingers along his neck. The dog leaned into her hand just enough. Memory stirred. Not sharply. Not painfully. Just a name, hovering at the edge of her thoughts. She shook her head slightly. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." Later that afternoon, she tested it. She rose suddenly. The dog stood instantly. She moved toward the hallway. He followed 2 steps behind. She paused. He paused. Her chest tightened. "You really are paying attention," she said. The dog's tail gave the familiar, gentle tap. Once. As if to say, "Of course." That evening, she sat with an old photo album on her lap. The kind with thick pages and fading corners. The dog lay beside her chair again. Always there. She turned a page. A younger woman smiled back at her, stronger posture, brighter eyes. Beside her, a dog. Different shape. Different coat. But the same calm gaze. Evelyn's fingers trembled. The dog beside her lifted his head. He didn't look at the album. He looked at her. "That's silly," she said, closing the book gently. "You couldn't know." The dog lowered his head again. But he stayed close. That night, when Evelyn rose to turn off the lamp, the dog didn't follow her to bed. He stayed by the chair. Guarding it. Waiting. And for the first time in years, Evelyn slept without waking in the night. The next morning, he was still there. As if time itself had agreed to slow down. As if whatever guided him, whatever quiet instinct brought him to that place, wasn't finished yet. And Evelyn began to wonder. Not if the dog knew something, but what he was remembering. By the 3rd day, Evelyn stopped asking questions out loud. Not because she didn't have them, but because something about the quiet felt important. The morning light came softer now, filtered through thin clouds. The room carried the gentle warmth of familiarity, the chair, the window, the slow rhythm of time. And, as always, the dog. He was already there when she arrived, settled beside the chair as if he'd been waiting. Not pacing. Not restless. Ready. Evelyn paused before sitting. She studied him the way you study something meaningful without wanting to disturb it. "You're early today," she said softly. The dog's tail moved once. Slow. Intentional. She lowered herself into the chair. Only then did he relax. That was when she noticed it. Every movement she made, every shift of weight, every quiet breath. He mirrored it. Not exactly, but gently. If she leaned forward, his ears lifted. If her hand trembled, his body angled closer. If she grew still, so did he. Evelyn felt a strange tightness in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. She'd lived long enough to know the difference. "You're watching me," she whispered. The dog didn't deny it. Later that morning, she carried her tea to the window and stood longer than usual. The street outside was calm, a few neighbors passing, a breeze stirring fallen leaves. She shifted her stance. Behind her, she heard movement. The dog had risen. Not rushing. Not panicked. Simply aligning himself behind her, a quiet presence at her back. She glanced down. "I'm all right," she said. The dog didn't move away. He stayed. As if all right wasn't the point. When she finally returned to the chair, he moved first. Same place. Same angle. Same gentle sigh as he settled. Evelyn laughed quietly. "You really don't miss a thing, do you?" The dog's eyes opened. Met hers. Held them. Then closed again. That afternoon, she decided to test her curiosity. She changed her routine. Instead of the chair, she sat on the couch. The dog followed, then stopped. He stood still, looking from the couch, back to the chair. He didn't lie down. Didn't choose a new place. He waited. Evelyn's smile faded. "That's not where you belong, is it?" she murmured. She stood, walked back to the chair, and sat down again. Immediately, the dog moved, settling beside her with a contented exhale. Her throat tightened. "You're not attached to me," she said slowly. "You're attached to this." The dog remained still, but his tail tapped once. That evening, she called her neighbor, Ruth. "I think I'm imagining things," Evelyn said, voice light. Ruth laughed through the phone. "Oh, is this about the dog again?" "He watches me," Evelyn said. "Not in a strange way. Just closely." There was a pause. "Well," Ruth replied gently, "some dogs are like that." Evelyn looked down at the quiet shape by her chair. "Yes," she said. "But this feels different." She didn't explain further. She didn't need to. That night, she dreamed. Not vividly. Just impressions. A younger version of herself. A different house. A dog resting by a chair that looked almost the same. She woke before the memory could sharpen. Morning came. The dog was there. Still. As if the night hadn't touched him. Evelyn sat slowly, hands resting on her knees. She didn't reach for him this time. She watched. And for the first time, she understood. This wasn't habit. It wasn't training. It wasn't chance. The dog wasn't reacting to her movements. He was anticipating them. As though he'd done this before. As though this moment, this chair, this quiet companionship was something he already knew by heart. Evelyn swallowed. "What are you remembering?" she whispered. The dog didn't respond. But his presence felt like an answer. And as the sunlight warmed the room once more, Evelyn realized. She wasn't just being watched. She was being kept. Gently. Faithfully. By a memory that hadn't let go. By the end of the week, the silence between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was shared. Evelyn noticed it in the smallest ways, the way she no longer filled the room with soft radio music, the way she let the kettle sit a little longer, the way she didn't rush to stand when her legs felt stiff. The dog never hurried her. He adjusted. Always. That morning, the sunlight arrived in long golden bands, stretching across the floor toward the chair by the window. Evelyn moved slowly, lowering herself into her seat with care. The dog was already there. Waiting. He didn't look at her as she sat. He simply shifted his weight slightly closer, closing the small space between them. Contact. Evelyn exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure why. The dog's breathing deepened, steady and calm. They stayed like that for a long time. No movement. No need. The house creaked softly around them, old wood adjusting to warmth. Outside, a bird landed on the fence. Inside, something settled. Later, Evelyn reached for her knitting. She hadn't touched it in months. The yarn slipped over her fingers, awkward at first. Her hands weren't as steady as they used to be. The dog lifted his head, watching. Not curious. Attentive. Her fingers fumbled. The yarn slipped. Before it could roll away, the dog extended a paw. Not playful. Not clumsy. Just enough to stop it. Evelyn stared. "Well," she said quietly. "That's new." The dog rested his chin back on the floor. As if nothing remarkable had happened. She laughed then, soft and surprised. The sound seemed to warm the room more than the sun. That afternoon, Evelyn spoke more than she had in days. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just fragments. "You know," she said, counting stitches, "I used to sit like this every evening. The dog's ears flicked. He'd lie right there, she continued, nodding toward the floor. Never in the way. Always close. She paused. Her hands stilled. He hated thunderstorms. The dog shifted slightly closer. Evelyn swallowed. I suppose we all have our fears, she said. The silence didn't press in. It held her. That evening, she set an extra place at the small table out of habit, she realized. When she noticed, she almost corrected it. Almost. Instead, she left it. The dog watched from his place by the chair, eyes half closed. When she returned, he lifted his head just long enough to acknowledge her. Later, she dozed. Not fully asleep. The kind of rest where thoughts drift freely. She felt warmth at her side. Steady breathing. Something familiar enough to quiet her mind. When she woke, her hand rested in the dog's fur. She hadn't remembered reaching out. But she hadn't pulled away either. You're very patient, she murmured. The dog remained still. His presence felt practiced. As though he'd learned long ago that comfort didn't need words. That night, she brought a small cushion from the bedroom and placed it beside the chair. For you, she said. The dog sniffed it once. Then lay down. Exactly where he always did. Evelyn smiled. The cushion stayed unused. And she didn't mind. Before turning off the light, she paused. She looked at the dog, at the way he rested beside the chair, aligned with it, guarding nothing and everything. You make this place feel less empty, she said. The dog's tail tapped once. Just once. That was enough. As the room dimmed, Evelyn realized something important. She hadn't felt lonely all week. Not once. And whatever bond was forming there, in that quiet space between chair and floor, it wasn't built on need. It was built on understanding. On presence. On a silence that finally felt complete. The first thing Evelyn noticed was the smell. Not the tea. Not the dust warmed by sunlight. Leather. Faint. Worn. Old. It reached her as she sat in the chair that morning, the dog already resting at her side. She frowned slightly. That's strange, she murmured. The dog didn't move. But his breathing changed, slower, deeper. Evelyn leaned forward a little, hands resting on her knees. The scent grew clearer then. Not sharp. Not new. Something stored away by time. Her heart gave a soft, uneven beat. She closed her eyes. And just like that, a different room surfaced in her mind. Smaller. Darker. A single lamp glowing in the corner. She was younger there. Stronger hands. Quicker steps. The chair was different, but the position was the same. By the armrest, a dog lay resting. Waiting. Evelyn opened her eyes quickly. The living room returned. Sunlight. Quiet. The dog at her side. Her breath trembled. No, she whispered. Not yet. The dog shifted. Not away. Closer. His shoulder pressed lightly against the side of the chair. Contact. Grounding. Evelyn placed her hand on her chest, feeling the slow rhythm there. You didn't bring this with you, she said softly. You just reminded me. The dog's tail moved. Once. As if that was exactly right. Later that afternoon, she went to the hallway closet. She hadn't opened it in years. The door stuck slightly. She pulled harder. It opened with a quiet sigh. Inside, coats she no longer wore, boxes she never sorted, and a low shelf near the floor. She crouched carefully. The dog appeared behind her, close enough to feel. She reached toward the shelf. Her fingers brushed something smooth. Worn. Leather. She froze. Slowly, she pulled it out. A collar. Brown. Cracked. Soft from use. Her name was etched faintly on the back of the tag alongside another name she hadn't spoken in a long time. Evelyn sat back on her heels. The dog leaned forward. He didn't sniff it. Didn't paw at it. He simply looked. Her throat tightened. I kept this, she whispered. I don't know why. Her thumb traced the edge of the collar, memory pressing gently now, not painful, just present. He used to lie by my chair, she said. Just like you do. The dog lowered himself to the floor beside her. Same alignment. Same stillness. As if the posture lived somewhere deeper than instinct. Evelyn laughed softly, the sound breaking, then settling. You sit the same way. The dog exhaled. A long, calm breath. That evening, she placed the collar on the table beside her chair. Not displayed. Not hidden. Just there. The dog lay beside her as always. But this time, his head angled toward the table. Evelyn watched him. You smell it too, don't you? The dog didn't look at the collar. He looked at her. As if the memory wasn't in the object, but in the space they shared. That night, Evelyn dreamed again. Clearer this time. A storm outside. Rain against the windows. Her younger self sat in a chair, hands trembling. A dog lay at her feet, solid and warm. Keeping the fear away. She woke with tears on her cheeks. The dog was there. His head lifted immediately. I remember now, she whispered. She reached down, pressing her palm against his fur. He leaned into her touch. Not pushing. Not pulling. Present. The next morning, she spoke more freely. About the years after. About the quiet house. About how silence had once felt heavy, until it didn't. The dog listened. Always. When her voice faltered, he shifted closer. When she grew still, he remained. Evelyn looked down at him. You didn't come here by accident, she said. The words felt steady now. True. You felt something, didn't you? The dog's tail tapped. Once. And in that gentle confirmation, Evelyn felt the mystery begin to loosen. Not to disappear, but to soften. The truth wasn't rushing toward her. It was approaching slowly. The way comfort always does. The shift didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly, the way understanding often does. Evelyn noticed it when she stood up too quickly one afternoon. A familiar dizziness swept in, gentle, but insistent. She reached instinctively for the arm of the chair. Before her fingers found it, the dog was there. Not blocking her. Not pressing. Just positioned close enough that his presence steadied her. Evelyn froze. Her breath caught. The moment passed. She exhaled slowly. You felt that, she said. The dog remained still. His body firm. Reliable. Evelyn lowered herself back into the chair, heart beating faster now, not with fear, but with awareness. She looked down at him. You didn't react, she said quietly. You anticipated. The dog's eyes met hers. There was no excitement there. No alarm. Just certainty. That was when it settled in her chest. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't comfort alone. This was something practiced. Something remembered. Later, she tested it again, carefully. She rose slowly this time, pausing midway. The dog shifted. Aligned himself. She leaned forward slightly. He moved closer. Evelyn laughed softly, the sound filled with wonder. You're doing what he used to do, she whispered. The room seemed to grow warmer at the words. She sat back down. The dog relaxed. The pattern was clear now. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't projecting. The dog wasn't just offering companionship. He was responding to a role. That evening, she brought out the photo album again. She placed it on her lap, the dog beside her chair. She turned pages slowly. A picnic. A holiday. A younger version of herself smiling freely. Then, a familiar image. Her chair. Different house. Same posture. A dog lying beside it. Evelyn's fingers trembled. She looked down at the dog beside her now. Same angle. Same patience. You sit like him, she said. The dog didn't move. He didn't need to. The memory completed itself. He stayed with me after my fall, she said softly. I was afraid to stand again. Her voice wavered. He learned before I did when to be close. The dog shifted slightly, pressing closer to the chair. As if affirming the memory. Evelyn closed the album. The room was very quiet. But it wasn't heavy. It was full. That night, the storm returned. Not violent. Just steady rain tapping the windows. Evelyn sat in her chair longer than usual, watching the light shift across the room. The dog remained at her side. She reached down, fingers resting in his fur. You stayed then, she whispered. And you're staying now. The dog's breathing remained calm. The rain softened. Evelyn felt a warmth spread through her chest, not grief, not longing. Recognition. She wasn't reliving the past. She was being reminded of something essential. That comfort had a shape. That love learned patterns. That care could be carried forward, even by a different body. When she finally rose to go to bed, the dog didn't remain behind this time. He followed her partway down the hallway. Not all the way. Just enough. Evelyn paused. You're making sure, she said. The dog stopped. Waited. When she turned back toward the chair, he followed again. Same rhythm. Same awareness. She smiled. The moment had shifted something inside her. The mystery wasn't gone, but it no longer felt distant. It felt close. Intimate. As if the truth was no longer ahead of her, but right beside her. Resting. Waiting. Evelyn didn't sleep much that night. Not because she was restless, but because her mind felt gently awake. Not racing. Listening. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn. The air carried that clean stillness that follows it, as if the world had been washed quiet. When she entered the living room, the dog was already there. Of course he was. Resting beside the chair, his body angled just as it always was. Evelyn stood for a long moment, hand resting on the back of the chair. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she spoke. I think I understand now, she said softly. The dog lifted his head. Looked at her. She lowered herself into the chair, slowly, carefully. Only then did he settle fully. Evelyn nodded. Yes, she whispered. That's it. She reached for the collar on the table. The leather felt warmer than she remembered. She held it loosely, not clinging, just acknowledging. He learned me, she said. Every movement. Every hesitation. Her thumb traced the worn edge. He learned when to be close, and when to give space. The dog beside her remained still. Listening. I didn't teach him that, she continued. I lived it. And he watched. Her breath caught. And you're watching too. She looked down at the dog. Not searching his face for answers, but accepting what was already there. You're not him, she said gently. I know that. The dog's eyes softened. But you know the shape of what he did. The words settled into the room. Not heavy. True. Evelyn leaned back, the chair creaking softly beneath her. He was there when the house first went quiet, she said. When it felt too large, too empty. The dog shifted slightly closer. He stayed with me until I didn't need him to anymore. Her voice grew steady. And then, he was gone. Silence followed. Not painful. Honoring. Evelyn placed the collar back on the table. Not as a reminder of loss, but as a bridge. The dog beside her sighed. A long, content sound. That was when it fully settled. This dog wasn't repeating behavior by chance. He wasn't responding to memory of her. He was responding to the space she carried. To the quiet signals grief leaves behind. To the way someone learns to move through the world more carefully. He recognized the pause before standing. The hesitation before resting. The weight of sitting alone. Not because he'd seen it before, but because he understood it. Evelyn smiled. You came because you felt it, she said. Not because you remembered him, but because you recognized me. The dog rested his head on his paws. At peace. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. Not sorrow leaving, but something else taking its place. Continuity. Love wasn't bound to one form. Comfort didn't belong to the past. It traveled. It found its way. That afternoon, Evelyn moved the chair slightly closer to the window. The dog adjusted instantly. Same place. Same closeness. She laughed. You really do know, she said. As the sun lowered, painting the room in amber light, Evelyn sat quietly, no thoughts pressing forward. Just presence. The dog rested. And in that shared stillness, the truth held firm. Some bonds don't disappear when they end. They change shape. They wait. And when the moment is right, they return. The days that followed no longer felt measured by time. They were measured by moments. Morning light touching the arm of the chair. The kettle's quiet hum. The soft sound of paws settling into a familiar place. Evelyn stopped wondering how long the dog had been there each day. It no longer mattered. What mattered was that when she sat, he came. Always. The chair by the window became something more than furniture. It became a meeting place. Between past and present. Between memory and now. Between a woman who had learned how to be alone, and a dog who understood how to keep someone company without asking for anything in return. One afternoon, Evelyn noticed she was humming. The tune came from nowhere in particular. An old melody. One she hadn't thought about in years. The dog lifted his head. Not startled. Curious. She smiled down at him. I used to sing that, she said quietly. When the house felt too quiet. The dog's tail tapped once. That gentle, familiar rhythm. Evelyn leaned back into the chair, sunlight warming her hands. She felt full. Not in the way joy announces itself loudly, but in the way peace settles when it knows it's welcome. Later, Ruth stopped by. She paused in the doorway, watching. Evelyn in her chair. The dog at her side. Well, Ruth said softly, I see you've made a new arrangement. Evelyn chuckled. Yes, she replied. And it fits. Ruth didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Some things explain themselves. That evening, as the light faded, Evelyn rose slowly. The dog stood with her. Aligned. Ready. She placed her hand on the chair for balance and felt steady. Stronger than she had in a long while. You can rest, she said gently. The dog didn't move away. But he relaxed. As if he knew she meant it. When Evelyn returned later, he was there again. Same place. Same quiet presence. She reached down, resting her palm against his fur. Thank you, she whispered. Not for staying. Not for watching. But for understanding. The house no longer felt large. The silence no longer echoed. It held. As the night settled in, Evelyn sat once more. The dog rested beside her. And in that quiet room, something became clear. Comfort doesn't belong to the past. It doesn't fade with time. It lives where care is given freely. Where presence is offered without condition. Where someone chooses to stay, simply because it feels right. The chair by the window remained. The dog remained too. And for Evelyn, that was enough. Because some comforts are timeless. They don't need explanation. They don't ask to be understood. They simply arrive, and rest beside you.